Welcome back. Today I'm going to show how I built the little clamp rack or clamp storage area in my garage. If you subscribed to me because of my last video, which was a review of a Bandmade album, I think I warned you at the beginning of that one that that's not what I normally do. This isn't our music review channel or a reaction channel. It's all over the place. This is my personal channel. It's just where I document what's going on in my life. That one happened to be Bandmade. And for those of you that didn't watch it because you're just here for the garage stuff, that one blew up, over 2,000 views in less than 24 hours. So I'm probably going to do that again at some point when I get my next Bandmade album. But anyway, the different clamps that I use for the woodworking and other DIY projects in the garage, I had some of them underneath my work table. I had some of them clamped to the legs and sides of my work table. I had some along an overhead shelf clamped up there where only I could reach them. And I wanted one place that was very close to my work area over in that corner of the garage where I could just hang my clamps up. And for the first time ever, I bought one of those giant sheets of 3/4 inch plywood, the 4-foot by 8-foot sheets. I don't have a pickup, so I had to have the store cut that in half for me. And I had them cut it in half long ways. So I had two 2-foot by 8-foot sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. And that fit in my minivan very carefully. And you see on YouTube one person carrying one of those sheets of plywood. They're pretty heavy if you've never carried one before or moved one by yourself before. Even the halves, I had a little bit of trouble wielding them out of the minivan and getting them into the house, into the garage without scratching anything up. But anyway, in this video, you can see me moving. It's not a very clear one, but you can see me moving one of those giant sheets of plywood that I have gotten cut at the store over onto the work table. And as you can see, it's far too long for my work table, but it's the biggest piece of wood I've ever worked with in my garage. And here I'm just showing the lines that I've drawn on it. Basically, I just made 2 triangle shapes out of 1 rectangle, and then I drew lines where I'm going to cut the corners off of those. And my idea was to attach those 2 triangular pieces to an existing shelving unit that I built several years ago. Here I have used my homemade DIY circular saw guide, which I've clamped down to this giant sheet of plywood. And I'm cutting off that rectangle with the circular saw. Then after repositioning the rectangle that I cut off, I cut it in half basically diagonally to make the 2 triangles. And then I used the jigsaw to cut the corners off. There's no reason for it to have really pointy corners. I'm not going to attach a clamp to a really pointy corner. And even though the top clamp rack, I planned on making 2 eventually, one lower for the smaller clamps and one up higher for the bigger clamps. And that one would be pointed out over my head. So no, I wouldn't worry about anyone, poking their head on it or anything. But still, there was no reason to have really sharp corners sticking out. And because these were just going to be stuck up on the edge of that shelving unit holding the clamps, I didn't really feel any need to do any sanding. I just knocked off a little bit of tear out that the circular saw or jigsaw caused. And you just sanded off a little bit of roughness. But there was no reason for these to be really pretty or smooth or anything like that. Here is a view of the top clamp rack in place. As you can see, it's just 2 pieces of the plywood. Now in between, you can see 2 little blocks of 2x4. Now I attached that to the post of the shelving unit so that the 2 triangular pieces wouldn't move left or right as much. I didn't know how much that they would if they were just screwed into the post, but screwed into those 2x4s, I figured that would add an extra degree of stability. Here's the sides where you can see the 1 row of screws or 1 column of screws is into the post of the shelving unit, and the other column of screws is into those 2x4 blocks to, like I said, add stability. And here, of course, are some relatively inexpensive but very useful Harbor Freight clamps hanging on the rack. Those are my largest ones as of this moment. And here's with a bunch more clamps on it. Again, there's some Harbor Freight clamps on there. I think those are Bessie brand. There are some Jorgensen clamps. There are some squeeze clamps that came with my plastic work table, and it holds quite a few. And in this last bit of footage, you can see both clamp racks there together. The lower clamp rack, of course, is for the smaller clamps, and there they are. They all line up really nicely. There's various ways I could attach them to there, but it looks like it's easier just to hang them over the edges of those plywood pieces by their handles. And they're right here next to my work table, so while I'm working, I can just reach in and grab any of them out, whichever ones that I need, and put them back very easily. So this was not a very difficult project. I just needed and wanted all my clamps over at one side, right next to my work area, which is this corner of the garage. So thank you for watching. Mainly, I didn't want to do anything complicated like I've seen on a bunch of YouTube videos where they make an extremely complicated setup for their clamps. As I said before, I just had them laying on the little shelf under my table, or clamped to the legs of the table, or clamped to the overhead shelf. The only idea here was to get them all in one place and relatively organized. I don't need it to be fancy. I don't need it to hold an exact size of clamps or in an exact order. I just need a place to put them where they're off the floor and kind of out of the way, but close enough that I can just grab them when I need them. This was easy, inexpensive, and it left me plenty of that 3/4 inch plywood to work on my next few projects coming up in future videos.